Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
When crazed Iranians attacked the U.S. Embassy in Tehran and seized 52 hostages back in 1979, it was not a spontaneous event. It didn't happen overnight. The forces separating civilization from savagery were whittled down steadily over weeks by the barbarians at the embassy gate. Is this what we just witnessed in our own country, with a seething, vengeful mob gathering steps away from the national seat of power, the White House? It may sound overdramatic, but the violent anarchists bent on occupying urban America have not slowed down. Far from it. They've now taken their campaign of destruction to a new level. And why not? They've not met any resistance from the Democrats elected to uphold the rule of law. And they are bolstered by the certainty that whatever actions are taken to thwart their lawlessness will be perverted by a legacy media which long ago sacrificed their last shred of journalistic credibility at the altar of destroying Donald Trump and all who support him. The fact that the president promised to vanquish the attempted occupation across the street from the People's House, and the fact that the mob was ultimately dispersed, does not change the reality of that frightening display. Hundreds of protesters attempting to topple the long-standing statue of President Andrew Jackson adjacent to the White House, desecrating St. John's, the Church of the Presidents, for the second time, then seizing and sealing off an area they called the Black House Autonomous Zone, or BAZ, I guess is how it's supposed to be presented. Does this sound familiar? Of course it does. It follows the left coast forerunner, first called Chaz, then CHOP, depicted as the Summer of Love, a block party, a harmless way for righteous protesters to put their anger on public display as they exercise their right to free speech and assembly. Yes, that's how the woman elected to lead one of the nation's 20 largest cities and the willing sycophants in the Fourth Estate presented the occupation of a swath of urban America known as a rogue nation of CHOP, renamed from Chaz. But whether these deconstructionists and anarchists carrying the label of Black Lives Matter and Antifa intended or not, their unlawful seizure of prime territory in the midst of downtown Seattle, and now, of course, BAZ in Washington, plus similar attempts elsewhere, stand as an apt preview of what the country will look like if the Progressive March on America results in Democratic Party rule in 2021. These occupations bring life to the worst fears of the people who understand the fragile nature of ordered liberty. This is what happens when the extraordinary bundle of freedoms we're granted in this unique constitutional republic are exploited by criminals and tyrants, mighty and petty. This is what happens when liberty turns to license. Do any members of the Seattle occupying force actually realize or care that constitutional rights cease to apply when they infringe on the constitutional rights of others? Let's put it in a way even the anarchists might understand. When you threaten or loot or burn or occupy a community, you have threatened the safety and security and life's work of countless innocent individuals. Some of these radicals preposterously cite the First Amendment, but most don't even bother since they're anarchists, which means they don't believe in the legitimacy of law itself, and especially not in this steaming cauldron of white supremacy known as America. And if the laws they seek to terminate are no longer being enforced, they can continue having a field day without fear of justice. These losers who've accomplished nothing in life, have been allowed, even encouraged, to deprive residents and business owners of their most fundamental expectation, enforcement of laws that protect them from exactly the type of predators we see on the long leash of Seattle Mayor Jenny Durkan. We've witnessed the same abdication of duty from D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser and the whole gang of craven Democrats holding power in the broad mass of urban America, and virtually all of the cities struck by violent protests. This is what passes for leadership on the left. But what to make of those tranquil scenes of peace-loving citizens strolling the occupied streets of Seattle, enjoying street art and food and music? Well, those are the daytime images transmitted by media evidently sworn to protect these people. But we all know that criminals ply their trade most effectively in the dark of night. Of course, our betters in the elite media have zero interest in covering CHOP after dark, but we now know the truth about the putrid underbelly of this block party from a courageous undercover journalist, Andy Ngo, who lived through 5 days on the chopping block. What Ngo unmasks is a love-in during the light of day transformed into an arcade of lawlessness under the cover of night, ruled by strong-armed vigilantes unconcerned with justice beyond the range of their own weapons. Here's some of what he wrote. No laws or rules applied here except for one: no cops allowed. Left-wing protesters stole city and business property to build a wall. Some of them openly carry rifles, handguns, batons, or knives. Rapper Raz Simone, real name Solomon Simone, patrols the CHOP on some nights with an armed entourage. Gunshots and screams of terror at night have been reported. A shooting erupted that left at least one person dead, another injured near a border checkpoint. Police were met with resistance when they tried to get to the victims. Police arrested another man after he left the Chaz or the CHOP or whatever, accused of sexually assaulting a deaf woman who was lured inside a tent. Police Chief Carmen Best stated that police response times to 911 calls in the surrounding area have more than tripled because the force is down one station. Homes and businesses within the CHOP, an estimated 30,000 residents, have no say over their new overlords. This armed anarchy and brute force criminality in the streets has gone so far beyond the justifiable outrage over the death of George Floyd as to render that whole conversation old news. This has now become strictly about the rule of law. Can citizens no longer depend on the most basic protections from their government? Must Americans, unable to flee the madness, remain in riot-scarred cities and be forced to live in fear of armed, lawless militia ruling their neighborhoods, threatening their safety and property and businesses? Are they no longer entitled to police protection? Let's put the bottom line question in the starkest terms. Are elected leaders of the Democratic Party no longer willing to enforce the law? Are we living in America or a banana republic? Especially in light of President Trump's Nixon-style pronouncement of law and order as the foundational issue in his re-election campaign during his unofficial kickoff in Tulsa last week, the sides are forming for a full-strength cultural civil war. On one side, progressive deconstructionists in government, media, and academia, anarchists, black militants, and fearful, impressionable white liberals now sold out on virtue signaling. On the other side, Trump supporters and anyone else who refuses to bend to the will of the mob. The choice has rarely, if ever, been more stark.